Okay, now I'm going to move on to the second part of our presentation, which is the Fleet Hall of Fame. For this part, I'd like to again call Vanna White, aka Mike Beeger up here. AFLA has been a sponsor of the Hall of Fame with Bobbitt Business Media from day one. I'd also like to call up our CEO, Ty Bobbitt, who I think is here. There, Ty Bobbitt. We've got 3 inductees this year. It's an honor for me to introduce our first inductee, Dave Hansen from General Motors. Dave joined General Motors in 1965 after graduating from high school, and he wants you all to know that. He worked in the GM assembly plant while attending college. He was a chief engineer for Chevrolet division, and he often comments that the highlight of his career was leading the turnaround while serving as general manager of GM Fleet and Commercial Operations in the late 1990s and into the next century. Now I want to tell you why Dave Hansen's getting inducted into the Hall of Fame. First of all, he is an awesome guy. If you haven't met him, I encourage you tonight. He's going to be around. Go over, introduce yourself. When Dave took over GM, the fleet operations, and this is a little bit of an insult to train crashes, GM fleet operations was a little bit of a train wreck. They had just consolidated all the brands together, which was actually a pretty good idea, and then they decided to launch the first electronic ordering system. Unfortunately, the ordering system didn't work. It didn't even come close. On the off chance you could actually order a vehicle, there's no way for them to tell you if it was actually going to be built, or when it was going to be built, or where it would be built, or what badge would be on it when it was built. In short order, I should say, Dave fixed it all. He had GM running like a top in no time. But one of the other things Dave's known for is putting on what is known as the greatest fleet preview in the history of fleet previews. If you're in the audience and you're in Savannah back in whenever that was, raise your hand. First of all, I think Dave bought the whole town. I remember getting off the airplane, and instead of it saying "Welcome to Savannah," there was a Goodyear blimp-sized picture of Dave Hansen, and it said "Welcome to the GM Fleet Preview." Nothing about Savannah. But it was an awesome event. It was incredible. First-class event all the way, and a lot of fun was had by all. I saw the mayor of Savannah last week on the Weather Channel as Hurricane Irma was coming, and they asked him how scared he was about the hurricane coming, and he said, "I survived 5 days with Dave Hansen and the GM Fleet team. I'm not worried about a Category 5 hurricane." True story, Marvin was there with the Red Cross, and they tried to do a blood drive, but after the first 3 guys, they said, "We're not going to be able to use this stuff," so they left. But Dave really did an incredible job, and without further ado, Mr. Dave Hansen from General Motors.
Thank you. Wow, where do you start? You start by saying thank you all. There's no doubt that this is literally the highlight of my 50 years in the automobile industry, and I want to say thanks to everybody in this room, thanks to the sponsors, thanks to my colleagues, thanks to my friends. What a great industry. I haven't done much public speaking since I retired several years ago, except at funerals, and I don't think this is a funeral. A few years ago, I told my mother that I sure would like to get into the Fleet Hall of Fame, and she said, "Well, I'm going to try and hang on until that day arrives." A couple of weeks ago, she turned 101. And she gave me a couple words of advice. One I'll share with you. She said, "Keep your nose clean, even if it takes both sleeves." So, good old mom. A good friend of mine told me there's 2 kinds of people on the face of this earth. Those people that are now humble and those people that are about to be humble. And I stand before you as a very humble person, and I'm very honored to accept this award on behalf of all the great men and women at GM and in this wonderful industry that I just love and respect. Looking back, time really does fly. 20 years ago, I joined GM with a smile, and then I found out about the train wreck. I wish I could argue with what you said, sure, but many of you reminded me in the last day and a half that we did have the problems that you so articulately talked about. I was fortunate, though, because I worked for a vice president at General Motors that really understood and appreciated and respected fleet, and with his help, we assembled a team of superstars that really turned this around in a short period of time. Bill Gibson, John Gaydosh, Dave Spence, John Moran, Chris Houlihan, just a great team that took GM back to its leadership position that it had enjoyed in the past. It took a lot of our hearts and our souls, but we did it, and we feel really good about it. Recently talking with Chris Houlihan and Ed Pieper, they tell me that the priorities are similar today as they were when I was in fleet several years ago. Yeah, the technology has advanced and there's been some changes, but the customer is always number one, and the customer has to be supported with good processes, good people, and good products, providing a safe environment, a safe vehicle, and providing support to the customer. And I'm glad to see that GM has continued that, and the industry has continued that over the past several years. I often reflect after I left GM on all of the interesting and helpful professionals that I had the privilege to meet while I was in the fleet organization. It was unusual for me to find even competitors seem to care about one another and help one another as much as they could. I don't think Ray Fisher is here tonight from Chrysler, but it was really inspiring to me to meet Ray and become a friend of Ray's and be able to receive some guidance, because he knew at the beginning of my fleet experience a lot more about fleet than I did, and he shared what he could to help me go in the right direction. In closing, I can't mention everyone who helped us at GM and who helped me personally, but I sure did receive great coaching. Early on, Ed Bobbitt politely told me that we were in deep trouble, and Mike Antich backed that up with, as he always does, hard facts and data. Thanks, Mike. For our first meeting, Ed jumped on a red eye to join me at the airport in Detroit, and that began the forging of a long-time friendship and professional respect. The one thing I didn't learn about until we were talking earlier today is I didn't know that Ed really was convinced I was his friend until we put a bottle of vodka in his room at Savannah, and then he said, "Hey, this Hansen guy is going to be all right." But even after retiring, Ed and I would get together to keep alive our friendship, and I doubt many of us can ever forget the great coach, nor can we watch a Michigan State football game without thinking of him. Thanks, Ed, and on behalf of the GM team, my family, and my friend that's here with me tonight, Julia, I want to thank all of you sincerely from the bottom of my heart. This is the best thing that's happened in my professional career. Thank you.
Congratulations, Dave. You deserve it. Long overdue.